Hello everybody, what's up? How are you all? Probably not great if you are alive and aware and possess compassion in your humanity. But we're all doing the best that we can. So I thought that I would lose my voice and also come to you all with a little bit of like a vlog because it's been a while. I have so much filmed content from getting married and moving and everything, but it's so intermittent and incomplete that I don't know if it's worth going through finding and editing and putting it together and trying to make it seem cohesive. And when I say worth it, I mainly mean to the viewers. So and this isn't like a like a passive, like, tell me you're interested kind of a thing. I'm gonna assume not, because I wouldn't be with somebody else's stuff, like, no offense. So I'm not gonna share that, even though you know, I said that I would film it and share it. However, I do want to kind of give you all an update on what I've been doing and what's going on now, and kind of share some stuff as I'm doing it now. I'm a little bit like full of like breath and energy, mainly because I'm really annoyed, because one of the things that happened is, of course, in my mid cross country move with kids, particularly a toddler, and getting her in daycare and around kids for the first time, and all of that, a family member who I help out with their like financial stuff, their rent company changed, and the person that I have to go through now, I'm sure, is a fine, well-intentioned person, but is really creating unnecessary frustrations and unnecessary urgency for me. And I just got off the phone or texting with them, and I just, you ever had those conversations with somebody where you really have to remind yourself, hey, don't go to war. This is not worth going to war for. You don't need to be making enemies for no reason. It was one of those conversations for me, and I think it's more about myself than about them. Like, I think it's just more that I feel highly demanded. And one thing I've been learning about myself is, like, when I'm really stressed and doing my best and I feel that other people are forcing unnecessary non-urgent urgency on me, I get really resentful and angry, which is my own stuff to manage. Like, other people can have their urgency, and it's up to me to decide, like, hey, actually that's not urgent. I don't need to absorb that urgency. It's not on them to prevent it from getting to me. Is any of this making sense? I hope it is. But anyway, so I'm trying to wind myself down because I had the urge to go to war with this person just because it was so unnecessary. But I did the effective thing. I validated first, which calmed me down because it helped me understand from their perspective why they might feel that it is urgent. And then now that's over with. So anyways, and I have been reading a couple of books, so I'm gonna share my thoughts as I read on that too. The three main books that I've been reading are all nonfiction. One of them is in a cultural exploration of eyeliner and the history of eyeliner. And I'll bring the book and share the author in another clip in this video because I can't remember off the top of my head, but I thought that was just such an interesting thing. I'm not a huge like makeup person, meaning like I don't care about like the history and the culture, but eyeliner, I think just in my personal history, was something I once used for more personal reasons than like prettification. And so I liked that idea of that. And I like what the author has to say so far. I'm also reading One Day Everyone Will Always Have Been Against This by Omar Akkad, and that is poignant and painful and necessary. So I'll definitely come and share my thoughts about that book and probably share some specific lines that stick out. It's one of those books where I have the urge to underline and annotate almost everything, or at least something in every paragraph, because it's just so hard hitting. So that's that. And then I'm also reading or listening to an audiobook on my Spotify, which I will be canceling that too, because I can't have anything nice, because everything nice comes with horrible consequences in this country. But essentially, for those of you who don't know, the the CEO of Spotify basically took his money and decided to invest it in surveillance that's being used, surveillance tech and companies that are being used for very horrific causes. So I'm going to be canceling my Spotify too. If you guys have an alternative music app or place to listen to music, let me know. I do want to just start getting into buying more physical music, like CDs or vinyls and things like that, just because with a lot of the way that tech companies have been working, I've been starting to realize I'm already like this with books. Like, I don't like to buy ebooks because I'm like, I don't like to not own it. People could filter what's available to me. They could take it away, and that happens. So I think I'm feeling the same way about music. I'd rather just buy it. But until that is available to me, because I did just spend a lot of money on a wedding and moving, let me know if you have any especially free or cheap places to stream and listen to music. But yeah, so I will share that. But anyways, on Spotify, I'm listening to a book about nonviolent resistance and why the author's position is that that is the most effective way to essentially get the needs of your cause met. And they're saying in what conditions, the premise of the book is, in what conditions is that true, that nonviolent resistance is the most effective method for success, and why is that true in those cases, and as compared to what. So that's really interesting, a bit dry, but interesting and I think relevant. So yeah, I will keep you updated as I go. One more quick thing, when it is that I am filming and you hear that noise in the background, that's my baby monitor, and I don't have the immediate ability to get rid of that because I finally have her own room, which is exciting, but I don't have it toddler proofed yet, and that is necessary. Boy, is it necessary. However intense you think toddlers are, when you're a parent or you watch one, you become a billion times more aware of how intense it is. But so I have to watch her when she's napping, and that's mainly when I film. So please let me know if it's too disruptive. And I will try to, if it is too disruptive, I'll try to figure out some other way of hiding the noise, because when I play the video back, it seems a little bit annoying and I definitely hear it. But if I were to watch a video, it wouldn't necessarily make me turn off of it, but I don't have a sensitivity to that sound per se. So if that is something that makes you all particularly not want to listen to the video, let me know and I'll find a way to rework it. Thanks. Still me, looking tired as hell, but I'm reading a little bit more of this book, which is One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This by Omar Akkad, which I'm probably going to be talking a lot about because it's very, very important. And I want to read this excerpt to you. It's kind of long, so get comfy. Yeah, I think it's important. This is from page 53, and it says, as always, the dead will be made to pay the moral debt born of their killing. At the start of this campaign, one oft-parroted justification was the nonsensical contrivance that Palestinians in Gaza were subject to collective guilt on account of their voting for Hamas. It is somewhat pointless to note that most Gazans are too young to have voted for Hamas in the most recent election, or that collective punishment of a civilian population for their electoral choices would be subjected to a far higher standard if scrutiny of that population weren't a politically powerless contingent of brown people, or that the very same terror group had long received support from the Israeli government as a matter of strategy so as to keep an entity in power that at least partially shared the government's disdain for peace or a two-state solution, or that the occupation and terror inflicted on Palestinians long predates the creation of Hamas. I also want to insert, wouldn't it be crazy if the American populist was held responsible for our voting decisions? Just saying. But back to his words. It is pointless even to make the obvious analogies to imagine the response had almost any other country on earth killed hundreds or thousands of civilians on a hostage rescue mission, or flattened every hospital in a city on the hunt for a terror group and then bragged about its success. Pointless because such things assume a conversation anchored in facts or reason or even the thinnest
presupposition that the people being killed, like those on October 7th, are human beings, their loss and utter indictment of the systems and leaders in the world that allowed it. Instead, as the scope and scale of annihilation intensifies, an opposite presupposition becomes necessary, one that imposes onto the dead the appropriate mendacity to justify their killing. A few weeks in, the notion that Palestinians deserve to die because some of them voted for Hamas becomes insufficient to hold up the body count. Soon, Palestinians become indistinguishable from Nazis, and then worse than Nazis. As their eradication continues, they must transform into the worst human beings on earth, the weight of their deaths only then sufficiently lightened. Everyone involved, the dead, their killers, the arbiters of the exchange rate, knows this for what it is. In 2014, when an Israeli newspaper runs an opinion piece in which the writer describes Palestinian children as the explosives of the future, there's no ambiguity as to what is happening, what is desired to happen. 7 months before Hamas attacks of October 2023, when the same newspaper publishes and then quickly deletes a post titled, "When Genocide is Permissible," the bedrock of polite intellectual discourse that liberalism so desperately and invariably sees as the hallmark of its own enlightenment is shown to be a phantom thing. A premise that, when most needed, cedes the floor to the concrete vocabulary of violence. And then the following attacks when Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant says Israel is fighting human animals. It is not a statement of belief so much as of permission. When those dying are deemed human enough to warrant discussion, discussion must be had. When they're deemed non-human, discussion becomes offensive, an affront to civility. What power assumes ultimately is that all of those who weren't directly affected by this, who only had to bear the minor inconvenience of hearing about these deaths from afar, will move on, will forget. Tomorrow, more Palestinians will die, but in the places where the bombs are built and launched, it will have no bearing on mortgages, bills, employment. Indeed, in many of these places, what will have a real economic effect is if the bombing stops. In social and professional circles, there will be limited tolerance for any talk about the fortunes of some exotic, dangerous-sounding people. In the context of self-interest, and maybe there never was any other context, it is utter madness to risk one's own prospects, standing up for people who can offer nothing in return. Tomorrow, more Palestinians will die, but the unsaid thing is that it is all right, because that's what those people do. They die. Just for a moment, cease to believe that this particular group of people are human. For millions of Westerners, this will always prove true. But for millions more, it will not. In moments such as these, when the lies are so glaring and the bodies so many, millions will come to understand that there is no such thing as those people. Instinctively, this will be known to those who have seen it before, who have seen their land or labor stolen, their people killed, and now the veracity of violent taking. Hey everybody, what's up? Hello. I do want to share a book that I just got done reading, and then a book that I am about to finish reading, and then what I have started since then. I don't have the book that I just finished reading with me because I returned it to the library, but I will be doing a reading wrap up for the month of July because I'll actually have enough books to do a wrap up for. But that was Pizza Girl, and I can't think of who the author is right now, so I will write the books that I talk about in this video and the authors below. Pizza Girl was a thing. It wasn't my thing, though. I'll talk more about it, but essentially it's about this, 18-year-old in California who is pregnant and working at a pizza place, and she's kind of processing her relationship with her boyfriend and her parents and this new girl who she meets via the pizza place that she works at. I'll keep it there for now. And it just was very, to me, kind of like weird, but not like the good kind of weird. Like, I like weird, but it was just kind of like, what? Go to therapy is what was going through my head the whole time. That's kind of like a gross oversimplification, but I'll talk more in the wrap up. But I rated it 2 stars, and then since then I am in the process of finishing. I only have maybe like 40 pages left to go of One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This by Omar Akkad. It's short, but it's taking me a while to get through. Along with, we might as well just go with like the themes of darkness, which, funny thing, I picked up Pizza Girl because of the fact that everything I was reading was so dark and I needed something to kind of get me out of it. And even though that book is kind of dark, it was a kind of dark that didn't correspond with what was happening and everything else, so it helped. But I also picked up from the library What We Knew, Terror, Mass Murder, and Everyday Life in Nazi Germany, an Oral History. This was written by Eric Johnson and Karl-Heinz Reuband. This is an older book. I heard about it through somebody on TikTok, and essentially it's kind of exploring through interviews of a bunch of different people what German Jewish people knew in the time leading up to World War II, and what German non-Jewish people knew, and whether they knew or say that they knew what was happening in, you know, the Jewish ghettos, in these camps. And I've heard this is a really important read, and I'm not even that far into it. I'm currently only on page 14. And I've only read, I think, like 3 people. That starts off with like the German Jewish people, or people who were living in Germany who were Jewish at the time, what they knew. And already I just see so many comparisons to what is happening right now in the United States, like how a lot of people, obviously, they didn't start their concentration camps and their gas chambers like that. Like they did a slow desensitization process, a slow lead up to it. And they did things like, oh, well, you know, you need to leave or else we're going to put you in work and labor camps. Our administration is telling immigrants right now, like, hey, if you don't leave on your own, then we're going to send you to our camps. And of course, we know when people who are dehumanized and treated as trash are collected in camps, no good ever comes of that. So this book is important to read and really difficult. And I hate like showing my intense emotional response because this isn't about me. And it's not even like a helpless emotional response. I think it's just hard to be fully aware of what's happening in the time that we're in and where it is likely to go if profound change does not happen, and not change that's going to happen by some Democrats doing slightly, I don't even want to get into that. Anyways, it's hard to know that. And then 2 other books that I have been reading as a attempt to just add some fiction, and even if not like lightness, just something else to my internal mindset. I picked up a graphic memoir called Halfway There by Christine Murray, and this is a young woman's self-discovery as she's half American, half Japanese. And it's interesting so far. I think I decided I'm going to kind of pick up some, you know, middle grade books, young people books, because it's something like light, easy to read, and I need that sometimes. I'm really finding I need that. And also for the purpose of like starting to build up a collection for my toddler in the future, like what books are worth buying, what books aren't, especially in this day and age when they're defunding education, and I don't know what kind of education my child is going to get and what kinds of things she's going to be exposed to out in the world and what she's going to have access to out in the world. It is really important to have a thorough library for her. So I'm working on, you know, different age levels and finding books that are appropriate at those different age levels, and that are diverse in what they talk about, diverse in the people it talks about and who's writing them and all of that. So this is cute so far. I'm on page 27. So, and then I also started How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu. And I don't really know what this book is about so far. From what I understand, it's like a book that is linked through short stories. And the short story that I started off on is pretty interesting so far. It's about this man whose daughter dies while she's doing, research, and he is going to the place where she was doing research to try to finish the research. And that's really all I know so far, but I will update you as I go throughout this week. Hey everybody, it's just a few seconds after I wrapped up that last clip, but I read something that I really wanted to share within Omar El-Akkad's book that I mentioned earlier. And in this part of the book, he's talking about how the Democratic Party treated protesters during the months leading up to the election, and how essentially condescending and dismissive they were about those people who were saying, like, look, we can't vote for you if you are actively supporting and maintaining this genocide. And how, oftentimes in these like pivotal moments in American history, like the civil rights movement, or anti-war protests during Vietnam, we like to think back at these times as though like these moments are like so American, and right, like we look back with this pride, but in these moments when they were happening, most people did not support those who were advocating for these changes. And in fact, many people, if not most people, looked down on those people, the people who were involved in the civil rights movement, and doing different protests and different acts of nonviolent resistance. The general American public, certainly the white American public, did not look at those people doing these brave, very like American bold acts as any of those things or any positive thing. They looked down on them, and they called them troublemakers, and they called them naive, right? They called them un-American, and that is exactly what's happening now. And he pointed this out in his writing, and he says, look up photographs of what we now consider this country's or any country's most morally diseased moments. The dogs being let loose on men and women asking for basic dignity, the marching of undesirables through the streets, the wrath, the bloodlust. Ignore for just a moment the people engaged most directly in the violence. Look instead at the faces of those who watch from the sidelines. Often what you'll find is not an expression of proud support or the shock and horror that all these people will claim to have felt much later after the verdict is in. Rather, you'll see a childish little smirk. It's the smirk of someone who has come to realize the ugliness of the enterprise they have passively aligned with, but cannot muster the courage to abandon now. The soul, or what's left of it, buckles under the weight of contradiction, and all one can do is hide behind that painted little smirk, the half stance of the spineless, the chanting with not quite enough conviction of 4 more years as the bodies pile up outside one's door. That stuck out to me because in some of the accounts that I'm reading in the book, I mentioned before about What We Knew Then, or whatever it was called, where in the beginning part, it's Jewish people who lived in Germany who are reflecting back on what they knew then, and they're talking about the German people, a lot of them in their interviews, and how, if you talk to German people then, because back when this book was written, there were much more people who were alive at that time. But they'll all say like, no, like we didn't know what was happening. We would never have like just sat back idly if we knew what was happening. We didn't know. And the Jewish, people are like, no, they knew. And I'm sure there were some people who didn't. But just like now, there are so many people who claim ignorance, or who will claim ignorance, who they knew. They didn't want to be burdened by acknowledging their knowing. right? They didn't want to have to change their views. They didn't want to have to look at themselves and think, oh my God, am I supporting this atrocious set of actions? Am I supporting a genocide? Have I been supporting a genocide? And so rather, they will just look back and convince themselves and convince others that they did not know. Or worse, they'll look back and they'll convince themselves and others that they were actively against it, that they fought against it. But the reality is that most people in a time of something happening will not be courageous enough to stand up. And that is a thought that comes up a lot in my mind, and that I've been kind of like processing, is like, I remember when I was in school, and anytime the topic of the Holocaust got brought up, people would always say things like, how could this happen? Like, I would never. And I think an area of privilege that I am discovering newly, of my white privilege, is the being able to be shocked that most people don't mean that. I think they mean it, but they don't. And I think I've never been I've never been in a situation where I've had to see in such a big, visible way how people talk out of their ass about what they will and will not stand for, which is a privilege to have been able to be ignorant in that way, or hopeful in that way. I think I really believed people when they said that they would stand up about something like this. And I think that speaks to my shock about people's responses now, even though I know a lot of people are technically against it by now, because they haven't been able to ignore 2 years of seeing the horrors that we are seeing. But even them, many of them are silent because they're scared of being wrong. They're scared of what like their neighbor or like their coworker like poo-pooing them, like, and I do get it, but like, it's a reminder to me, and it's a very serious reminder, that I do not want to be such a person where I look back on this time. It's a good reminder of the necessity of being intentionally courageous during these times. It's so easy, especially when you're not the target population of these dehumanizing, disgusting, despicable things happening. It's so easy to fall passively into the background and to say among your friends that you trust quietly, like, oh, this is so horrible, but to do nothing and to stay silent allows that to happen. That is why governments like ours that's why they're so actively trying to word these things passively. It's why they try to cover these things up, because if too much of the populace speaks up openly and says, no, we will not accept this, then it is harder to control the backlash. And then they are forced to change at least some things, right? But when only a few people speak up, it's easy to label them and to do away with them. And so it's a reminder that if you really want to stand for what you say you stand for, which I think most people say they don't stand for genocide, they don't stand for locking innocent people up in cages and pulling them away from their kids and preventing them from getting health care that they need, or preventing them from getting food and water that's clean and safe, that's happening in America, then you will speak up. It will be scary, yes, but you will do it, because it has to be intentionally done, and we have to give just as much energy and fight to the things that we want to see as the things that we don't want to see. So while we are actively talking about and sharing these things that are happening, we also have to be talking about the ways that we can do well by one another, the ways that we can care for one another, the ways that we can make community a place of love and tolerance and respect. this world doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be your well-being at the cost of somebody else's life. It's not true that other people are taking away, well, let me rephrase that. It's not true that the people that are being pointed out are the people taking away your quality of life. It's the people telling you it's those people that are doing it, right? It's not immigrants that are taking away your quality of life. That's not the reason why you don't have affordable health care. It's the billionaires who are telling you to look at those people. And if instead of fragmenting our populace and finding ways that, you know, your neighbor is the monster or your neighbor is the reason why, right? If instead we banded together against the very few people who are sprinkling crumbs over everybody else, if we banded together, our quality of life would be different in ways I don't even think we can imagine. But we need to start imagining that, because that's one thing that the opposition does so well, is it tells a clear narrative that people can buy into. That's one thing that people more on the left, we don't do. We don't have a clear narrative. We know what we don't like, what we don't want to see, but we don't give people a narrative of what could be. So people have a harder time buying into that. But we need to start being clear about what that life could be. We need to have that narrative, because the narrative is that we can have beautiful community. We can live and do well by one another. And it just reminded me of the need to intentionally speak and act and think about that every single day. And I didn't mean to go on a tangent. I'm just so passionate about this stuff, and I think many of you probably are too, or if you're not, I hope that you gain awareness and become passionate about this, because this is everything. So anyways, I'll share more about what I think in a future update. Hey, what's up? Hello, everybody. I'm here to film what will probably be the last clip for this reading vlog. And if you hear children's music in the background, I apologize. Hopefully my audio doesn't get flagged. But my toddler is here with me, and she always wants to film with me. And obviously I want to protect her and don't want her on camera. So distraction is required. But I wanted to just quickly share with you, before I wrap up this vlog, a book that I just decided to pick up randomly this morning. When I say randomly, I mean like it's been on my shelf because I want to read it. So it's not random in that sense, but random that I didn't plan to read it. I have other books that I have open, but I walked past it and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna try it. And that is I Who Have Never Known Men. This is written by Jacqueline Hartman and translated by Ross Schwartz. And also apologies for the background. It's a mess. I'm always doing laundry. I'm never gonna catch up. So anyways, that's there because I gotta fold that. However, I wanted to share a thought that I had while reading through this. I'm only on page 11 right now. And in this, I don't really know anything about this book. Like going in, I don't really know much about the plot. However, I do know it's about something having to do with like women like kind of living in a situation where they were never around men, I think, hence I Who Have Never Known Men. And then that changes, and they're like sharing observations about the differences, perhaps, I don't know. But I do know that any woman whose reading tastes I tend to align with or like respect has said that this book is phenomenal, and so that's why I picked it up. And right now the main character, who we have like no name for at this point, is, at least that I remember, is sharing you know, how like basically she has discovered the ability to tell stories in her head, and that is fairly new, or she's recalling back to the time when that was true for her, and how she's like, because a lot of times the women in this cage that she's in with, I don't know if it's like a literal cage. It sounds kind of like a jail cell or like a dungeon. And they always talked about what life was like when they had romances with men. And of course they lamented things that come with that too. But she never had that experience, because at the point that she's recalling, she's young. And apparently because she never got her period, even though she's hit puberty, she's like destined to never be able to be with a man. Again, I don't know much about the world, so I don't know how to explain that better, because I'm still learning about this world and the character. But regardless, she's talking about how she had started to feel kind of resentful because she wanted to know, like, what does it mean to be with a man, and like, why do people enjoy putting their lips together? Like, what does this even mean? Because she hasn't had that experience and nobody's explained it to her. And because she knows she's never going to have that experience, she wants to know. And then she learns how to essentially build stories in her head, what makes for a good, exciting story, so on and so forth. But so far, again, I'm only 11 pages in, so this could change, but all the stories revolve around building a romance, building physical intimacy with a man. And it made me think back to a TikTok that I watched yesterday, actually, but an idea that I've kind of played around with in my head before, which is how language, and the language that we're exposed to, shapes not just our experiences, but our literally like our worldview. That language shapes the ways that we see the world, what we pay attention to, what we don't. And I think because this is largely an idea that somebody else presented to me, that's priming me to see it in this book, The Irony. I'm gonna link the TikTok below. But I was thinking a lot about that. Like, it's very interesting how this girl, because of the language, the way that the English language, this isn't actually even written in English originally, so I also wonder like what ways that might play into this or not. But because the way that the language has been used around her has been largely to tell stories of women in relation to men, the only stories that she seems to be cultivating in her mind are also about men and her relationship to men. And I just thought about that, like, because at first I was reading through this and I was like, well, why would, like, she has developed this ability to tell stories in her head. Why would they all center on the same theme, which is like her first kiss or her first embrace with a boy? And then it occurred to me, oh yeah, because that's the way that the language and interacting with her world has been modeled. Everything so far, well, not everything, but like they're in this cage, they're in this cell, and aside from cooking, sleeping, pooping, like, right, like they don't do anything else other than tell stories with each other. And what they seem to tell stories of, at least so far, is about men. So of course, because this is all she has known, that's all she knows how to play with in her mind. And I think a lot about this idea of like, how does the English language in my case limit my experience, limit the way that I relate to life, relate to my life, relate to others, and how would I go about breaking that if I wanted to, which I think that I do actually, but there's only so many limitations that we're going to be able to work through. And I think about that a lot. And one thing that the TikTok creator in the video that this made me think about said was like, have you ever felt as though the language that you speak is not adequate to describe your inner world? And hell yes, I have felt that way, but I always thought it was my... Yeah, baby girl, I love you. I'm almost done, I promise, sweet pea. Sorry. But I always thought that was because maybe I wasn't, I don't know, good enough with language or intelligent enough. And it didn't occur to me until it was posited to me that perhaps part of that is also due to the fact that the English language simply does not have the adequate mechanics and vocabulary to describe my inner world. And at first I thought, nah, I'm not that complex, like it's not that deep, but I don't know, it was kind of validating when I heard that. Please let me know, like I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Do you ever find that the language that you speak is just sometimes inadequate to describe your inner experiences? And if you're bilingual or trilingual, does that ever still seem to fall true? Or what is your experience with one language being able to describe certain aspects of your inner experience, but other languages are more effective at doing so. I don't know. I really like playing with this idea. Let me know. I look forward to talking with you in the comments. I look forward to hearing from you. I hope that you are doing okay and taking good care of yourselves, drinking water, eating food, remembering that these day-to-day ways of taking care of yourself are not just important, they are essential. Okay? So take care of yourselves, and I will see you soon.